Okay, so last video we were talking about Article 1, Section 8 and the enumerated powers. This time we're going to dive straight into the necessary and proper clause, which is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. And we're going to really look at what it is that adds to the enumerated powers. All right, so let's jump into the language of the necessary and proper clause first. So the necessary and proper clause, aka the elastic clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, the very last of the clauses in Article 1, Section 8. So it says, Congress shall have power to. Please remember when you're reading Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, that it says to make all laws which shall be necessary, but you always have to go back to the very first, the subject of the sentence, which is at the beginning of Article 1, Section 8, which is Congress shall have power to. So the necessary and proper clause says, Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or any department or officer thereof. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I want to give you some scenarios because I think if you understand these scenarios, this will make perfect sense to you. So let's say that I am going to hire a babysitter for my daughter, and I'm going out 2 nights in a row. The first night I'm going out Friday and Saturday. I call my sister, and I say, can you babysit? She says, I can only do Saturday, I can't do Friday. Okay. Then I ask my friends for a referral, and I get a referral to a 14-year-old babysitter who my friend has used twice. She said she's good, so I hire that babysitter. So we're going to look at the different ways that I would handle those 2 situations. And really, it should really connect very closely to what we're talking about with the difference between the state and the federal government. All right, so with my sister, she comes. My sister and I are just like that, lockstep. I'm going to say, have a great time, have fun, and leave. She's going to do whatever it is that she wants to do because if it's okay with her, it's okay with me. When the 14-year-old comes, it's a very different story. So what I do is I tell her she can do a number of things. She can watch this stack of approved videos. She can go to the park, which is 1 block south of my house with my daughter. They can bake cookies. All the ingredients and the cookbooks I show her where they are, or they can draw or read. So I give the babysitter those instructions and I leave for my event. And let's assume hypothetically that 3 hours later I get a call from the emergency room. Let's look at the different scenarios. First, the babysitter says, everything's fine, your daughter is fine, but please come meet us. And I say, what happened? And she says, well, I gave Maggie a glass of water. And apparently there's some kind of bacteriological problem with Denver water right now. I've just heard it now that I'm at the hospital. And so she's got some stomach distress. My question is, did the babysitter go beyond her authority? So what do you think? Do I have something that I should be angry with the babysitter about? Take a minute, turn the video off, and come back when you have an answer. Okay, so my suspicion is that you came back with the answer that no, the babysitter didn't do anything at all wrong. And we'll talk about why that is. That's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, she calls, says something's wrong, and I say, what happened? And she says, well, Maggie was playing on the jungle gym. She fell down and she hurt her arm. Am I angry with the babysitter in that scenario? Again, take a minute, turn the tape off, and come up with your answer. Now, the third scenario I would like you to consider is this one. I say, hey, what happened? I'm on my way to the ER, but what happened? And she says, well, my 17-year-old boyfriend and I were driving Maggie to the movies, and when we were merging onto I-25 from I-70, we got in a car accident. She's fine, but you need to come and get us, or help at the emergency room. So let's look at the difference between those 3. In scenario 2, where Maggie was playing on the jungle gym, I think everyone would say the babysitter did nothing wrong. Why? Because she was clearly within her enumerated powers, her express powers, the powers that I listed to her. Hey, you can take Maggie to the park and play in the playground. Clearly she is within her authority. Scenario number 3, she and her boyfriend got in a car accident with my daughter merging onto I-70. Obviously that is what? Within her authority or outside her authority? Clearly that is outside of the authority that I gave her, and I'm very unhappy with the babysitter. She is acting beyond her express or enumerated powers. What about the one with the glass of water? Am I angry with her? clearly I'm not angry with her, right? What if she said she was talking to Maggie? I didn't give her express power to talk to Maggie. What if she said she allowed Maggie to use the bathroom? I didn't put that on the list. But clearly those are implied by her role as babysitter and by the things that I put on the list. They're not express powers, but they're also not outside of her authorization. They are implied powers. That is what the necessary and proper clause creates for the federal government and for Congress. It creates a zone of powers that Congress can use that are not expressly on the list, but that are clearly implied. So let's read the necessary and proper clause again and kind of think of this in the context of the babysitters. Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the U.S. or in any department or officer thereof. Let's say that Congress would like to authorize the purchase of a building for the Immigration and Naturalization Service so that they have somewhere to house their employees. Is that implied by the power, the express power, to create an Immigration and Naturalization Service? Or let's say Congress would like to purchase some battleships. Is that an implied power that goes along with Congress's power to create a Navy, which is expressed in the actual list? Of course those two things are. They don't have to be expressly on the list because they are clearly implied. We want Congress to be able to do those things if it's going to be able to carry out its express powers. So that is what the necessary and proper clause says, is that Congress can make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Let's take a minute and talk about what that means. So the foregoing powers, what's another word that we know that uses the word F-O-R-E, before? All that means is the powers that are listed in the enumerated powers before this one. So for example, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2, Congress shall have power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Commerce Clause. So we know that anything that is necessary and proper for carrying into execution one of those enumerated powers is within Congress's implied powers. So I want to, for a moment, go back to our diagram that we did last time about the powers of the state and the federal government. Take a look at that. Okay, so we had the square in the middle, if you recall, and that represented the enumerated powers. That was the powers given to the federal government. Outside, we had the circle. Those were the powers that were given to the state governments. Now remember, the states pre-existed. The states created the Constitution. They ratified the Constitution. They gave the federal government its power. They pre-existed. And then, of course, we know that under the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, belong to the states respectively, or to the people. That's what we did last time. So this time, here's the enumerated powers. I'd like to change this diagram this way. By adding a small zone that we're going to call the necessary and proper clause. It expands Congress's powers, not completely, but it gives a zone where Congress can act within the implied powers, doing things that are not expressly listed on the list. Okay, when you're ready, let's click on to the next video.